In number 9, we want to write the equation of this sine or cosine graph. And so first of all, we want to decide, is it a sine or cosine graph? So the way to determine is to see where the graph is crossing the y-axis. Is the graph crossing the y-axis at 0 or off of 0? Well, this one's off of 0. So this is a cosine graph, and it's starting in the positive, so it's going to be a positive cosine graph. So the general equation of a cosine is y equals a cosine of b theta. A is your amplitude, b is your number of cycles between 0 and 2 pi, and theta represents the variable for the angle, the radians. Okay, so we can fill in some values here. A we can get by looking at how high and how low this graph goes. It's half the distance between the max and the minimum point. The maximum point is 3, the minimum point is -3, so the distance between 3 and -3 is 6. So half the distance of 6 is 3, so our amplitude is 3. And cosine, B is our number of cycles. So we can either do it by looking at the graph and seeing how much of the graph is graphed between 0 and 2 pi, or you can use the formula. We know that the period is 2 pi over b. So if our period is 2 pi over b and we need to solve for b, we can just switch out the b in the period, because all this is a proportion and you're allowed to cross multiply here. So b is equal to 2 pi divided by the period. Well, our period is how long it takes for one full cycle to occur. So if we look at our graph, it starts up here at 3. How long does it take to get back to that same point of 3 to restart? Well, if this is 2 pi, each line is representing 1 pi. So this is 1 pi, 2 pi, 3 pi, and 4 pi. So if this is 4 pi, our period is 4 pi. So to find b, we take 2 pi and divide it by our period, which we said was 4 pi. So that will reduce down to 1 over 2. So our b ends up being 1/2. And then we just substitute in for the equation. Y equals 3 cosine of 1/2 theta. So we can write that over here on our line as y equals 3 cosine of 1/2 theta. Okay, and number 10, which of the following equations is the equation of this function? Well, first of all, I can eliminate if I have a cosine right in here, because I know it's a sine graph, but there's no cosine, so I can't eliminate those. I know it's a negative sine graph because it's starting from 0 and going down, so anything that's not a negative graph I can cancel. And B is not negative, C is not negative, D is not negative, so I found my answer. My answer is A. So that's process of elimination. We can get A is our equation. Evaluate each expression, round each answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so we want to find the cosine of 2 pi over 3. Well, 2 pi over 3 is a radian degree, or I'm sorry, a radian angle. So we're going to, in our calculator, to round the answer to the nearest tenth, you have to take the cosine. So what we need to do now is change our calculator to the radian mode. So on your calculator, change your mode back to radians, and you can just enter cosine of 2 pi divided by 3. Divided by 3. So cosine of 2 pi over 3, and we can get our answer is -0.5. So that's -0.5. Now we have a degree. So to do sine of 21 degrees, we have to now change our calculator back to degree mode. Make sure it's in degree mode. And we can do sine of 21. And we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so 3.5 The 5 will round this 3 up to a 4, so that's 0.4, positive 0.4. And now we're finding an angle measure because we're using an inverse tangent. So we can do inverse tangent of 3.732. Hit enter, and we get a 74.99 degree angle. We're rounding to the nearest tenth, so the 9 will round to a 0. So this is actually 75 degrees, approximately 0.0 degrees, rounded to the nearest tenth. Find each value using the right triangle trigs below. Express your answers to the nearest hundredth. So if we're looking at this triangle, if A is our reference angle here for sine, we're going to use SOHCAHTOA. So if we're using sine, we need the opposite and the hypotenuse, because the sine of A is opposite over hypotenuse, which in this case is opposite is 13, and our hypotenuse we don't know. So to get that, we're going to use, since we have two sides of a right triangle, we can use the Pythagorean theorem. So we can do 8 squared plus 13 squared equals c squared, which is 64 plus 169 equals c squared. C is going to be the square root of 169 plus 64, which is 233. So that would be the square root of 233, 15.3 approximately.